Scene one, Apple, take one.
Hi, everyone. I'm Shane Borza. Welcome to another episode of Film Notes, the show where I interview people in the film industry about the film industry, and we get their notes on not only what they do, but the things they've learned in their career. Today, I have a new friend, Travis Guba, who's over in the Texas film world. He's in Dallas, Fort Worth, and we just met recently on a film. And I always love when this happens because he was the cinematographer, and in my head, when I meet someone, I go, "Oh, you're a camera guy." And then I looked him up afterwards, like, "Oh, you're an actor and a filmmaker and a teacher." Yeah. So one of the things I really wanted to do today is learn about all the different roles you've had in your career. So thank you so much for joining me so we could talk about that.
Thanks for having me. I love podcasts. So yeah, how I spend every morning. I listen to way too many. So I have to drive kids around at this time and wait in the car for them. And they're two like totally different schedules. So I'm in the car a lot. So they're great. So anyway, I'm talking about podcasts for some reason. So ask me a question.
Well, as I mentioned, people that listen to the show know my favorite kind of person to interview is a multi-hyphenate. People that do a lot of different things. So, but let's go back to the beginning. Like, how did you get involved in the film world, and what has been your trajectory? Like, if you started doing A and then you went to B and now you're at C, how did that all come to pass?
Well, I'm a little bit older, so I sort of got into it as a hobby back when there was tape. So we would have two giant tape players, and we'd like play point A, right? And then you pause it and put the tape in, and then you hit record, and it would go back on. And that's how we made it with hard cuts like that. And to render any text out was like hours to do that blocky like starring or the name of it, hours, and you'd go away and come back, and it would be there. But that's how I started and got into acting. I guess I got my cookie and reward with acting and writing. And I ended up getting like a full ride scholarship. I know it's unheard of, like it's only in movies, to any school that I wanted to go. Like I thought I was going to go to community college, and suddenly these people gave me money to go anywhere. So I did American Academy of Dramatic Arts one year because it was kind of late in the season. And then I transferred into NYU to School of the Arts. And I was there for a few years, and I studied acting, got a degree in acting with a minor in directing. Went to teach high school for a while just because I was at that not quite sure what to do phase. And after a couple of years of doing that, being a theater teacher, doing shows and doing all that effort, I kind of realized that if I didn't make a move and really try to do something, like I would just have a look back with regret. And so I auditioned for some graduate programs. And I ended up choosing to go to the American Conservatory Theater in San Francisco, where I went to be an actor, but always did these sort of like side projects. This time we'd moved up to mini DV, still on tapes, but you could put it onto a computer easily, which was huge. And one of my roommates was actually beta testing Final Cut Pro, and so I got the very first one. I got to work on that, and that was just like a penny drop like that. And then I got to do like this giant like Taco Bell campaign, and I was hooked, right? They flew us to Arizona. We shot for 2 weeks. I think Jeffrey Kimball was the DP on it. Anyone who knows him out there, he always dresses like in a white linen suit, kind of like Mark Twain. And he was just wonderful. He did all kinds of big feature films, and I learned that a lot of like major cinematographers will shoot commercials because they love it, because it's a very short time commitment, and they'll make as much, if not more, than a feature film sometimes. So that's probably why commercials, I learned, look so amazing. The Taco Bell I did was Back with the Dog. So it was the last one with the Yo Quiero Taco Bell. The dog was treated better than every actor that was on the set. I mean, all non-essential people had to leave. The dog's name was Gidget. It was a very large Chihuahua. It was a female Chihuahua, remember? And it had its like own AC unit. We're in the back of this van, just dying, but the dog had its own AC unit, so we kept trying to drift off getting some of the AC. Almost died on that one because that was back when drones really weren't used, so they did the helicopter filming. and they were flying like behind us in this van sideways, and we just heard this bang, and the rear, I guess, stabilizer propeller had hit a roadside and like was kind of wobbling, but then recovered and went out. But I was like, well, that's terrifying. Yeah, so from there, I did that. I moved to New York, and I was working as an actor, did a lot of commercials. And then once you do, people in New York, or maybe it's changed, that once you do your one Law and Order, just kind of like film and TV is just kind of like an occasional, side gig that you'll get for an indie. But it felt like I had hit a plateau there. So we moved to Los Angeles because I'd flown out there to test for a few sitcoms, and they seemed to go with the local guy because it was just easier and cheaper, I think. Or maybe they're just better than me. I don't know. And then once I was in LA, I just started, working, and this was sort of a side thing I did outside of teaching. And I taught at a very nice private school on the West Side, and got to interact with people in the creative community, some celebrities, and just got to be a part of that community, even though it was sort of in an ancillary way. And it excited me. So I just kept doing these side projects. And then when I moved to Texas a few years back, 2019, I was teaching, and it just wasn't a good fit. And so I was like, okay, well, I'll teach at the university. And then I realized what the whole world of adjunct faculty is, and how much they're treated terrible. And I just like, I don't want to do this anymore. So I started doing video and film and making my living at it. And that's where I am. I've just been shooting small things. I had a couple things that are on Amazon, which are great. And I'm just sort of doing the indie scene and working as a cinematographer for hire. And I've done sound for hire. I've done editing gigs for hire. But I think I really like to be on set the most and come up with images, I would say. That's a long introduction, I'm realizing. So.
Well, and again, one of the things that I think is notable or helpful is there, and this is in the industry, everyone always says there's no one way in. You ask 100 people, they're going to give you 100 different answers. But the career path also, it's not linear. People are switching roles, or they're going from filmmaking, behind the camera to in front of the camera, or vice versa, or what have you. And I think it's helpful for people, especially if they're younger or people outside the industry that don't understand the industry, to hear different people's stories of, well, how did you end up where you are? Not only geographically, like moving across the country a couple times, because I think that's another thing that people don't know. They feel like, well, I have to be in New York or LA, so I have to pick one. And I have been interviewing people that live anywhere but those two places. So I'm curious, though, what brought you to Texas? Was it a gig, or was it family? How did you end up there? Which in a way, you're kind of halfway in between the New York and LA, where you were bouncing back and forth.
Well, we've been in LA like 14 years. We have 2 kids. And when my daughter was coming up to be in 6th grade, we had such a great time and a wonderful community in elementary. But once you hit junior high, as anyone who remembers junior high, you really have to get your kid in a very focused place. Otherwise, you just kind of lose them, because as a parent, it feels like you get fired somewhere around 12, 13. And if you're lucky, you can come back to be a consultant, like when they're 17. But yeah, it's a very vulnerable place where you just want to know that they're around good people. So we worked really hard, paid for a lot of tutoring, and our daughter was always very academically driven, and we got her into one of the top 3. There was like 3 programs in Los Angeles: Science Academy, Portola School for Advanced or whatever, and IHP it's called. And they're all highly regarded, and people from all over the city like fight to get those 40 or 60 slots. And we'll drive like 2 hours to take their kid there and back every day just so they go there. So we lived 10 minutes away, and I was like, oh, this is perfect. But when I was picking up my daughter every day, she was angry and mad. And I just felt like, is this a transition thing? Like, what's going on? Is this puberty? Like, what's going on? And one day I noticed that she played Sims, and she kept making these like traps for little sim characters, like, but they'd fall into a pit of pigs and the pigs would eat them, or like there was like perpetual falling into a well. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. Who's that? And she's like, she named the teacher. And I was like, she's murdering her teacher in Sims, and that's not good. That's a little above and beyond. And then I came to find out that the teachers were like very shame based, and it was still like almost 40 kids in a classroom. But long story short, it's just like we didn't have $62,000 a year to pay for private school. And even with financial aid, it would still be a good chunk of change that we didn't have. And we were living in a 2-bedroom rent controlled apartment. You know, we have a daughter who's about to be a teenager. And so we just felt like that was compressing us. And then there was a opportunity to be a theater director at a private school out here. And I was like, well, things have lined up. And there was a family house that was really nice that we could live in. So it just seemed like everything lined up. And, you know, California's not taking care of certain things like the cost of living and house, and, you know, not addressing the homeless situation. And increasingly, it seemed like there was less production happening, that it was all going out of the city. And where I was as an actor, I wasn't a celebrity or a star that was going to be flown out of LA for those things. Like I was doing smaller day player, smaller guest star things. And they're hiring that local because they have to as part of the tax structure. So I was like, well, it's time to go. So we packed it up. We went out here. Kids are doing great in private school. I was grateful to be out here for COVID, as far as that they got back to school in person, like much quicker. And I know there's some debate about that, but I don't, it was a rough time. So I was really grateful to have that.
You know, and that's another thing that's really important to address, is like balancing out the different parts of our lives. I know a lot of people who aren't in the industry anymore because they felt like they had to make a choice between, you know, like, well, I'm not making any money, so I need to get like a career job, or, well, I have to move home for my family or whatever. And so I think it's also really important to kind of show people like, no, you can do both. It just may not work, you know, in LA, for instance, but that doesn't mean you can't be part of the industry. And that's one of the things that I think is, I'm really happy to hear. There's a lot more industry now, for better or worse, you know, it's kind of spread out, but you don't have to be in LA or New York anymore. You can be in Texas, or you can be in Atlanta, or you can be in these other places and still have a successful career. But also the idea of a career in the industry means different things. You don't have to just be in a studio. You could be teaching, you could do theater, you could be doing lots of different types of things. So talk a little bit more about, especially because you mentioned earlier, like you like being on set. So before you were on set in front of the camera, now you're kind of on set more behind the camera. So how has those two things maybe worked together? Did you use skill sets from one to help you with the other? Are they completely different? Because I've never done any acting, so I've only ever been behind camera.
Well, you should be on the camera. I think you got a great look. You should be out there doing it. And how can you not like be on a set and like the creepy extra gets fired and they didn't grab you and put you in it? I mean, that's got to happen at some point.
I am an exceptional creepy extra.
They're about to fire the creepy extra, and they're like, "We'll get you." No, we'll keep that guy. Well, so I think, anytime that you're on set, it is a learning opportunity. Like I've been on I was in Dark Knight Rises, and just like, there's Christopher Nolan, and I sat in Christian Bale's chair by mistake. This is right after the Terminator thing. And I was like, I'm going to get yelled at. And he's like super cool, for the record. He's not crazy. He's a very nice person. But like being on that kind of caliber and seeing like all of the things that go into it. And like the other one is like being on big commercials it's pretty epic, the amount of people that are there and the amount of work that goes into it. And I did a lot of those, and they were like what we used to call Class A network national commercials, which were the big ones that showed on everything. They weren't like your local ones with Cal Worthington selling you a Toyota truck. Nothing wrong with those, but they're completely different scale. So like being on that side of giant set and then seeing how much of that transferred into smaller productions. Sometimes you could really want a little bit of that structure that was in that one over onto the smaller productions, but also really excited about the way that those sort of terms like changed and people did multi jobs and helped each other out, and just felt a little bit more creative, like putting on a production, like, hey, everybody, my dad's got a barn. Let's do a show kind of thing. More preparation than that. But like, you figure things out as you go along. And I think that kind of that sense of improv you have to balance. But that was always exciting because you felt like everybody was doing their job, but you were also connected in a way that I think on bigger productions, you don't get to have that. Like everybody just stays in their lane. Like here are the grips over here. They don't even really talk to the sound. They actually hang out at the crafty table and the lunch table together, and sound are kind of reclusive over there. Makeup are usually social. So they're sort of like able to blend with everyone and they kind of get close to the director, and then the talent sits together for some reason. I was always sitting at the table with the grips and learning, or trying to get to know how the DP approached it and asking them questions. And usually, they really like to talk about it if you're just showing interest and you're respectful. And, once you start getting that star look in your eye, you can see them get very protective. But like, sometimes if you're just like, I know what I'm doing here, but I'm really interested in what you're doing. Like, you talk about like why you made the choice, and like you're shooting on this type of film, but I know you're always putting these type of filters. Like why would you do that? And like these lenses, like what do you can ask all those questions. And being on those big sets, I just learned a lot being on those sets. And I always did both. Like when I did theater, I'm kind of away from theater now, I would be able to do everything technically. I knew how to do the light boards, hang the lights, do live sound production audio, or like 62 channels mixing live for a musical, which is the most stressful thing I've ever done, and teach kids like how to do that. And I think some of my proudest moments are some of the kids that I taught, like pursued and excelled at the thing that I taught them. One of them just invited me to see some of the Dallas Opera because he's in charge of the entire lighting department at Dallas Opera. He's like 27, and I couldn't be more proud of that. Sometimes I miss that, being of service to other people. But talking about, I think, the industry moving, I think quality of life is important. I think I just kind of did this post on social, on Facebook about it, because I'm on the crew boards, and there's so many people that are just like at the end of the rope with it, and losing marriages. A lot of them are losing homes. A lot of them can't even get a job at Trader Joe's because all their work experience says that they were in production, and everyone there assumes that as soon as production picks back up, they're going to bail. So they're just really struggling to figure out how to do it. And I guess I just sort of said, it's like, you have to prioritize relationships, because at the end of your life, I don't think you're going to be laying there going, God, I really wish I had been script supervisor for half my rate on that 10 episode Netflix show. Like, despite all these people who love me around me, like that's the thing you're going to fixate on. And I know a lot of people that are just sort of further on in their life, and they're kind of lonely. Everybody they know is just from film production, and it's a sort of a transient life where you're together creating this amazing thing as a family, and then everybody goes their different ways. I mean, even people that are doing network television, they get that for a while if it's a long run, but at some point it's like everybody just goes their separate ways. And when you go the separate ways and you're not working, it feels like all the interactions you have with people kind of become transactional, because you want to see them, but you also want to see if they can get you hired onto a gig. And it's sort of, it feels weird. And if they're working, you're not working, they know that's kind of the reason that you're connecting. And there's suddenly this like sort of distance there that feels weird. And I think what I said was like, it's so wonderful to be on like a set on the lot, like on Warner Brothers. You go through you park, you go across the street, you go through security, you're chatting with the people, you go down to where you're supposed to do your gig, you got your dressing room or you got your area, you meet everybody, and you have like the best time for a week, like the best time. And then starting that Monday, if you try to get on that lot, you'd be arrested. Like suddenly these people that you're chatting and close with, like, again, they're treating you at this distance. And at some point, I think I realized, like, I'm not wired to do that well. Like, that took a toll on me. It felt, in a way, it's like a betrayal, but, you should know going in, like, that's kind of part of it. And make your peace with it and know that during the downtimes, that's just a part of it. And at some point I was like, I'm missing my kids' stuff. It's hard to plan to do things because what is it? The best way to book a gig is to buy a non-refundable ticket out of town, and boom, okay, Spielberg wants to see you for this thing. It's absolutely true. And if you don't bail on those plans, your agent or your representative is immediately like, look, this isn't professional. I can't work this way. I lost a couple agents with that because once I needed to go see my dad. He was really sick, like with a heart thing. And I was like, I don't know what's going to happen here. But, there was some audition and I was like, I can't be there because I got to go. I'm in the car on my way. And they just said like, well, I can't work, like this is unprofessional. And I was like, this is unprofessional, as opposed to calling someone like last minute and telling them they have to be somewhere in 12 hours or whatever. Yeah, so I just kind of got tired of that. And I didn't feel like my role in a lot of things was telling the stories I wanted to tell. And it felt sort of very minimized and sidelined and started to feel like a cog. So I was like, I think I need to leave this alone for a while. And it'll always be there. It's the hardest thing, I think, to get through your head is everyone's like, oh, I'll lose my ends or I'll lose my momentum. You're like, how much did you really have? The people that you'll connect with in 5 years are probably people that would have helped you out in 5 years ago in the past. Those were the people that could have done something. Or maybe the people you were really close with somehow got to move up the food chain a little. And now they have the ability to hire you as opposed to like trying to sneak you in a side door. So that, and I mean, production's going everywhere. They're building like 2 studios over here in the suburb next to Dallas. There's like a couple big ones here outside in Fort Worth, and there's Austin. Robert Rodriguez set up a whole studio system almost there, and then Atlanta's a big mecca. So like as someone who's working, you have your Southeast representative, or people down here in the South, and you're working there. And it seems like there's more work there than there is in LA outside of like some episodic TV stuff. Yeah, it just sort of made sense. Like, let's make a move, see what happens. I'm actually considering maybe doing acting again. Like Taylor Sheridan's out here doing a bunch of stuff. He did the Yellowstone for a while. Now he's doing one called Lioness. And they were actually just filming in my neighborhood like 2 weeks ago because I live in like sort of this like private community. You can't, and the thing takes place like in the rich neighborhoods of Dallas, but they won't let you shut down any roads in Dallas because they're surprisingly small, and it's a big city, and it's one of the fancy areas with a lot of lawyers in it. So they're like, they can't do it. So they come out here down the street and pretend it's Dallas. But there's a lot of, I've always like fancied wanting to do like a Western, and my name's Travis. I mean, I think I have to do one cowboy role at some point. And yeah, so I think I may throw my hat at local things, but I don't think the auditions are going to be as much. And I feel like here I can say no to stuff. Like in LA, it never felt like, the power you have is to say no to stuff. And here I feel like if I say no, I can still have a relationship with an agent because I can tell them why. Like, I don't think that's where I'm at. I don't think that would be good for my career. I don't think I'm ultimately the best person for that because it's gonna this and this and this is going on right now. I feel like you could have the relationship here.
When again, these things are all, even in the industry, not so well known because a lot of people have a lot of fear. They feel like they can't say no, or they can't even talk about it to other people, where they're like, I'm not sure. Like, do you ever feel that way? Like they want to risk the other person, like, what are you talking about? Or risking moving to outside of one of the hubs or what have you. So it's exciting to hear that. One of the things that came up for me in June, I went to the Nevada Women's Film Festival here on the UNLV campus, and one of the big panels was about the studio that's coming to Vegas next year. And so there are a lot of these smaller hubs that are happening around, and it's giving people, you can fly from LA to Vegas in like 40 minutes or whatever. So people can come back and forth, but it will provide a bigger springboard for people locally here to say, oh, I don't have to choose between living in Vegas or working in LA. Like, there will be more opportunities and more of them are coming. So to hear of other areas like that, I think a lot of people know of like New Mexico, Albuquerque and some of those places get shot. But yeah, to hear about Austin or Dallas Fort Worth or of course Atlanta, it does give people more options, but again, they need to know that they're out there. So I'm really glad that you talked about that. Now, I know you have
Real quick, can I just say,
yeah,
when it comes out there, I fully expect all of the background to be from like Cirque du Soleil, like upstaging.
they're like, they came here for us.
No,
Well, I
just
wanted to
everything's
ask
so
you,
over the top dramatic, you know, like
with the outfits, you know, and all
Yeah.
the face makeup. Well, you were talking earlier about doing a bunch of production stuff now. You're editing and you're doing camera work and all these things, and you have On the Path Productions. So talk to me a little bit about creating that and what you're doing with that. Sorry to stop the show, but we've got some bills to pay around here, and to do that, I wanted to point out a couple things I've got on offer at shaneborza.com. As both a master level mental health coach and an award-winning filmmaker, I have the experience and expertise to help you go further faster, regardless of whether that is in your production or life. I am psyched to announce all my courses and books have been updated and expanded and are available on both Apple Books and at my shop. Especially wanted to point out my film notes book and workbook, where you can learn everything you need to make your film and get it out to the world. If you need help with either your life or film, please reach out. And now, back to the show.
I just wanted, like, I've always had on the path as kind of like a philosophy, and I've had that email like on the path at mac.com forever. It was sort of a double entendre because I used to live in Jersey City and I had to take the path train, and I was also felt like I was on the path to something. So I was like, perfect. I was there for 9/11, and the path train I took was no longer. So I was like, ooh, I hope that's like not an omen to anything. But I know, I guess I moved to Brooklyn after that so I could get to the city quicker. Started doing On the Path Productions because I've always been someone who like loves the technical aspects of things. I try to figure out how someone gets from A to B and like sort of dissect the elements to it and then try to get myself there. So I started, I used to be an Apple tech, so I was always like building computers and fixing them. And so I was like, okay, I want to really go in depth with all of the editing programs and learn how to be a bit of a colorist. And just DaVinci became like my main thing to work because I hate the subscription model. Like I hate that every month I would have to pay Adobe for, like 20 programs. I only used 2 of them, and I could have a couple months where I really wasn't editing, but I was still paying for that. That bothered me so much. And so DaVinci, they give it to you for free to learn it. And then if you want all the amazing effects and you want to go past 4K, you pay for Studio. And you pay for like $300 one time. And if you buy a Blackmagic camera, they give it to you. So I was like, perfect. And I just started, it was always how people did finishing. And they did the coloring, like the node system and the way it worked. And I spent some time with professionals to see how it worked. And I was just very, enamored by like how you would start off with this image now, and it could be clean as you want it, but by the time you put it out there, it could be really sort of have a lot of character to it. Like, of course, I want to get a lens that gets it in the lens and shoot anamorphic and have some of those 70s and 80s qualities. Fantastic. I'd love to have those. But that's like what, 80 grand to have 3 Mercury Orions. Like, it doesn't make sense. So like and I like to know the gear. So if I kept renting it, it feels like you almost had to add an extra day so you could really learn about how to use it and learn where something excels and where the issues were with it. So I like to sort of own it because it also gives you the ability to do projects that you can work with your own stuff and you know it inside and out, so that you're consistent. You can also rent your equipment to the production, or you can just include it with you to get a little bit of a higher rate because you come with everything. And then when you show up, like instead of doing a line item for every piece of gear that they need, you can bring everything you want and the extra 15% that you probably will need. And you will be so thrilled that you brought it because it works for, a surprise that happens. You're like, oh, I got these barn doors for this tube light. We'll stick it over here. No one will see it. Fantastic. So I started doing the productions because people kept hiring me to do gigs. Whether it was like to come and do gimbal on something or bring the camera and do B-cam. I've worked on weddings, which is a long day. And I may be reaching the end of the road with that. I mean, I could probably take the photos of them, but like the videography is just backbreaking for like 10, 12 hours. And now I've gotten to a place where I have a few people that I hire to go with me, and I kind of stand around and point a lot and I do a little, but that's doable. But starting out, everyone like that's budget conscious is hiring the cheapest person, which is like one guy with a Sony A4 and a gimbal, and you're just not going to get everything. But the guy's 26, 25, he can do a certain level of running around that I just can't anymore. And they're somewhat unsatisfying. You know, it just feels like if you look at people who do that type of work, it feels like every piece is kind of a paint by numbers. Like they always have this type of thing and they do this type of thing. And they have to do that because that's what they're selling, right? And all their pitches to clients, like this is the type of work I do. And I get bored really easily, I think. And I just always want to figure out another way to tell the story, not just with shots, but emotionally. And stuff that's, being ADHD, like 3 sentences into something or the first like half a scene, I already know where the end of the movie is. Like I've already figured it out. And I cannot love anything more than something that like sucker punches me that I didn't see coming. It's so delightful. There's a show called Wayne that's on Netflix. No, Prime. And it was only 1 season. Watch it. It's great. And there's a couple moments that I was like, holy shit, I did not see that coming. And last night I watched, House of the Dragon. I don't know when this is coming out, but they did this whole scene where one character had sort of been deposed in the King's Council, who was always like really in the middle of it. And the scene goes on and they just stay on her and they sort of do the slow push it. The scene, you could still hear the scene going on, but it's all about her like processing, like, what's going on. And the sound design is amazing. But that was the moment that I was like, that's unique. That's interesting to see. Sometimes with doing like a commercial thing or doing especially corporate thing, because corporate stuff tends to be like, oh, we saw this other company, they did it this way, we want that. And so it feels like you're copying this model, which is great to pay the bills. So, I'll do word of mouth, going back to the business. I have people that hire me to go do their gigs and they hustle them. And then I hustle them on Upwork too. But somehow I've kind of found like these gigs, like working for schools to like film their live events, do some of their corporate work. I do a documentary for this one school that does this tribute to the seniors. And it's like an hour long, like with slideshows, and we interview the kids and try to like get something out of the kids that we can support with the video. And I've done it for a few years now and I really love it. But those are the kind of little projects I do that give me the ability to go and do my projects. So that's kind of where I am. I'm trying to make a living with it. Part of me is kind of like, you know what? I think I may want to pick up like a part-time gig at like Costco because they have great benefits. And if it's a part-time thing, you can kind of get the benefits, do a little work, keep yourself grounded and connected to other people, because it can get really sort of isolated and lonely if you're always in the editing room, if you're new to an area. And this has been I don't really necessarily fit with the culture that I'm in. And so getting out there and just doing something else and trying to find your people is really valuable. I think that's why I like going in the field, because I meet new people and I'm like, oh yeah. We are, what is it? We are bridging here. We are, of similar minds, our wavelengths fit together. Like this works. Because you don't always get that. And I think it's one of those things that you could take for granted. I wish I didn't go to film school. So I kind of wish I did, just because all the connections you make with like, hey, I need someone to do sound for mine, and then I'll shoot yours, and then Toby can edit it, and then we can flip those roles and kind of support each other down this. Always try to find some money to pay people, even if it's just $100 for a day or whatever, because I think it just changes the whole vibe of how they interact, because they feel respected and regarded.
You were just starting to say a couple of things that I think are good takeaways. So this is going to pivot me to bring us back to the purpose of the show, which is to get those film notes from people. So you were talking about like connections, making sure you're always raising money to pay people. So what might be some other good notes that you've learned, or maybe wished you'd known earlier that you'd like to share with people who would be watching the show?
Oh, yes, excellent. It's time to be a blowhard. Uh, well, I mean, I talk to people, I talk to a lot of young filmmakers because I hire a lot of younger people. There's this thing like people get out of programs, these arts programs, and it's kind of like, good luck, right? They've met some cool people that were inspirational that taught them stuff. And I think there's this fantasy that, they're going to stand out and that, like Sean Levy's going to be like, listen, those questions were amazing. Would you like to come and associate produce like Deadpool with me? Because I need someone like you. The first thing is tell a story that you want to tell for the sake of telling the story. Every time I engage now with a small project, within the first couple of sentences, people are talking about all the festivals they're going to submit it to and what they want the trajectory of it. And for me, like that can be in the back of your mind, but if it's that much in the front of the mind, then you are kind of corrupting, I think, the artistic impulse that would make it unique enough to get the recognition that maybe you want. So all that energy of like, oh, we got to make sure we do this and submit it to this, like just push it out of the way and do a short film that tells a story that only you can tell, that's comparable to your experience. I know, like when when I was back in LA, we had a few sitcoms and series we pitched, and the question that always came up is like, so why are you the person to tell this story? And where are we seeing this in the industry? And people want to see the comparables of like, oh, it's kind of like this thing meets this thing, but it's told from this perspective. And I understand that because like my mom went through this, and like I had to go through that journey with her, and it was difficult. So like when you have some sort of connection to it, it just makes it, I think, easier to kind of pitch it or sell it. Don't write the screenplay before you pitch it, or write the series before you pitch it, because they'll immediately know whether they like it, right? They say like, oh, I read it, thanks, no, right? Or their assistant read it, give them some, and they can push it off. But if you have an idea to pitch now that you can get them excited about it, maybe they'll option the idea, or they'll hire you to write it, or they'll take your idea, pay you some money, and have their guy write it. Who knows? But it's a lot of energy to write a script. Along those lines, just sort of an inside thing from my writer directors in LA, get intellectual property. Meaning, instead of thinking about the screenplay as the way in, why don't you do a book series or a children's book and get someone to animate it with you and get people excited about it? And then a studio or network may option that to make it into something. If you look at a lot of the stuff that's on there that's gathering like big names, you'll see that it's adapted from a book. What was the one with Joel Edgerton that's on right now? The Dark Matter, that's adapted. I know that Big Door Prize is one on Apple that's adapted. Silo, like you really look, like the last credit in the opening will be adapted from the series. So if you have a creative notion, maybe initially the film telling is not the way to get it accessed by a bigger market. That saying, I think you should tell independent films as well. The other advice I would say, outside of like having the nature of wanting to tell a story, is write it immediately, overwrite it, put it all out there, and then leave it alone. Come back and look at it with clear eyes, cut, leave it alone, and we'll come back to it and see where it's at. And you just sort of like a Hemingway novel, like trim every extra word out that you don't need. And when you get it to a good place, get some actors, be a part of like a reading group that will get together, or pay everybody like $25 to come together, and you rent a room and you hear it out loud. And if you get good actors, you can hear like, oh wow, I overwrote that, or that character's voice is not clear, but now I hear that actor saying that, I would change it for that. That just sort of like gets your content in a good place. And that process takes time. Everyone like wants to rush right into getting it done. But if you have something solid, a spine to build it off of, I think you're going to end up with a better project. Raise some money ahead of time. Some of that, everyone wants to just tell everyone their idea and go like, yeah, what do you think? How about you give me $1,000 to do that? We're visual. It's a visual medium. Put together a pitch deck, like get the images, get the comps, get the teaser, get your log line in there into a little package that you can send to someone. If it is a feature, just scrape together somehow by hook or by crook a 5-minute portion so they can see it, so you can see the tone of it. It'll be hard depending on how crazy it gets, but it gives you something to then show people that you just get a better result with it. Be mindful of your fundraising. You know, like the third seed and spark I get from somebody, I'm just kind of like, brother, you're gonna have to figure this out, man. Like like your mom can't pay for all of them. Like, you know, like, come on, try to figure this out. And then know that when you get that seed and spark fatigue, and also kind of don't mess around with the t-shirts and coffee cups. It's like a full-time job, like with all of these Indiegogo, like, oh, you end up with like $200 of t-shirts that you're never gonna get rid of. So don't mess with those. Give other incentives. I would say that when you write the stories, be mindful of what you have access to. So if you work at Starbucks, maybe if you know the manager, they may let you shoot a few things overnight if you show a little production insurance or something. Know talent in your area that you can draw upon. Know people who in your, especially if you're a smaller market, that want to film and grow a reel and just do it for the fun of it. So if you look at all those things, you can keep your production costs lower, but also, you know, you're not trying to do a crowd. I just did a film where I completely overdid it. Like I had a kid in it, right? The kid had like two moms that were divorced, and one of them was into it and the other one was not into it. So trying to navigate that schedule for locations that were given for free in this amazing low cost. So we're juggling these two things. We're juggling when these people were available that were really great, you know, camera ops, and we're juggling trying to get the actress up from New York to do it. We're juggling trying not to exhaust our relationship with like the person who's giving us the location for free. And it was just so, and then I was like, you know, we should have a party. We should have a party scene. So now we had extras and we're managing a small little production, right? And it got so out of control, and the budget money, and like I'm fighting with the guy I got in to do it with. I was like, man, tell a 3-person story in the beginning and just like try to get a few locations, obviously make that primary one that you can do it. I would strongly recommend that. Also hire a sound guy. People always in like small productions, like especially starter productions, they're like, the sound's fine. Sounds fine. And it always sounds like dog shit. And you know, you spend all this money trying to fix it, but it's so much easier. And if you have bad sound, people are going to watch it. That's the truth of that. Don't watch camera reviews on YouTube, because it's this rabbit hole of sucking you into the next piece of gear and always feel like you got to keep up with the Joneses. And you're like, oh, I should sell this camera and get this camera because it has one more stop of dynamic range. The truth is, almost nobody's going to notice. You will, your 2 other camera guys will notice. But if you do good shots that are motivated emotionally, that have good lighting with a good story and good actors and good directors, aren't going to notice that. I mean, obviously you want to get something a little bit more, like you could probably do an iPhone, I guess, if you're starting out, but you start out simple. Like if you're shooting stuff, like try to shoot with like natural light and buy a 5-in-1 disc. The amazing things you can do, like if you have nighttime things with like a little bounce on someone, you know, you can open it up and use the diffusion on it. Like all of those things that you can do go so far. And then past that, start working with like getting one key light, get a single light that's good, and figure out all the ways that you can use that to have a one light shot. Roger Deakins is a big fan of this. I just watched Sicario again, because that's also Taylor Sheridan who's doing all the stuff here. Benicio del Toro is just the most amazing actor ever, because it feels like every second he's dangerous in some way. Like you don't know what direction he's going to do. He could be your best friend. He could murder you right there. And some of the shots that they used in that, like I'm thinking about the last scene, spoiler alert, where he's asking her to sign this release contract. And it's just a crappy little kitchen light above. And it couldn't be more intense, and it's just a shot of her. And it's like the way it's falling on her, but it's clearly like a above light.
I'm glad you brought up Deakins. I was just going to say, I can't remember. I think it's him. He's famous, there was a famous line where one of the great cinematographers said, if you can't light it with one light, then you can't light it. And so it may or may not have been him, but that less is more. And a lot of the things you talk about of doing simple things well and then adding on complexity later, I couldn't agree more. I want to make sure people know how to see what you're doing.
Hold on. Can I give you one more thing?
Yeah.
This is one of my most important things. Hire good actors. It's like 80% of your work has to do with having a good actor that has good instincts, right? And you're collaborative with. That kind of relationship really reads on film. So if you're doing something, you're casting your buddies in it, you're just putting such a cap on what you could potentially do. And you should use, if you don't have someone who's amazing that you worked with, take the step to use Actors Access or Backstage or something that has a website that the amount of effort it takes for them to get their headshot onto that website, to see your listing, to send an audition, that kind of vetting that happens in that is huge. The chances of you getting Crazy Town on your set are way less. And you can, I mean, they do all the work. They'll put a self-tape up there and you can look at like, okay, these are the 6 people we believe in. You guys can all do it remotely, have a conversation about it, and do the casting. You're not renting a room. You're not, all this extra stuff you're not doing. But it really makes or breaks what you get on film.
And that's a great note. And you're right. It's, you get what you pay for, and whether it's sound or camera operation or what have you, it's just bumping that up a little bit and saying, yes, if you're just learning, go in the backyard with your brother and just shoot it on your phone. But when you're going to do like the film, that's where you're going to be in a much better place if you go, how about I wait 6 months? I'll raise $1,000 or $2,000 so I can pay everybody instead of trying to have like, who'll do this for free? Because it's going to elevate the whole project. So I'm really glad you put that in there.
And if you pay your actor, like, I mean, they're the centerpiece of it. You pay them $50 or $100 a day, or you say like, hey, we're going to shoot this over, 4 days or whatever. We'd like to pay you $400 or $500 flat, and we'll probably have a pickup day or whatever. They will probably jump in it because they feel honored. They're so used to doing student films. If you guarantee that you're going to finish it, the tier of actor that you get goes up. And if you say it's paid, even if it's only $100 a day, there are great actors that will sort it by paid or not paid. So a lot of people are like, I'm not in the place to do it for free anymore. I need to get paid something. And the quality you get and the way that, again, another layer of vetting, it's so worth your time. Your time is money, and you cut that corner, you're going to pay for it, kind of thing. And if you're a director or a producer, the one last thing I want to add is like, let everybody do their job, right? Sometimes people want to micromanage every elements and just run an open, relaxed set where like people feel that they can bring their best stuff and be collaborators and just like that cool energy because it reads on the film. You know what I mean? Like I've been on commercials where the person was famous, but they were such a prick. And everyone was miserable, and everyone was checking their phone for their next gig the whole time. And when you saw it on film, like you could see that it wasn't enjoyable, and it was supposed to be like a beer commercial. You're like, wow, that is the most depressing beer commercial I've ever. Like, I do want to drink, I do, for all the wrong reasons. So, just to be mindful of that, what you bring to the energy of the set starts with you, and you get to inform all that. So, think of how you can do that. It's not easy. It takes some time.
I wanted to ask, how can people connect with you or see some of your work? Where can people look for you and what you've done?
I'm going to say that classic thing that everyone always says. My website, I'm redoing it right now because I have a ton of content that I want to get onto it. But On the Path Pro at onthepathpro.com. I'm On the Path Productions, but there's some guy who does like a spiritual podcast in Santa Monica that won't give me that name. Like, there's like one podcast a year, and it just won't give it up. So On the Path Pro, which actually I kind of like more because it's shorter. That onthepathpro.com. I will update that soon. I'm trying to get better at the Facebook, but I'm at On the Path Pro on Insta. I'm not really doing TikTok. My daughter's harassing me about it, so I'll probably have to do that at some point. I'm on Facebook, Travis Guba on Facebook. I just log into On the Path on there, and I have a film coming out soon called Edirath Films, which I'll tell you more about it when we get further along. That's the one with the crowd scene that I'm trying to get through that one. Man, let me tell you. And yeah, those are pretty much where you can find me at. Yeah, you can see I have a film called Take It In that's on Amazon. It's a short. Take It In. If you search Take It In, short, you'll see it. I'll give you the poster for it. It was a 10-minute short that we did that was really great acting by a couple actors. So
Well, perfect. Yeah, and if you're watching the show on YouTube, you'll be able to see. I'll put all the links on the screen with screenshots to the socials, and you'll be able to see the poster. So, as an outro, if people are just listening to this as a podcast, it is a show on YouTube, and I always encourage people to watch the show because not only do you get to see the person I'm talking to, but you get to see all those images. So if we're talking about a film, for instance, I'll show you the poster. If you're talking about somebody's website, you get to see the website. So of course it's easier to listen to podcasts to take us all the way back to the beginning when you're talking about driving your kids around. So this show, if you're on your iPhone or Spotify, go to my YouTube channel and watch it. If you're watching it and you want to catch up on some of the old episodes, go to your favorite podcast platform and you can listen to them while you're, biking or driving or doing whatever. I really want to thank you for being here. I know you got to go, but it was great talking, and I look forward to seeing more of your work soon.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. I really like to hear the sound of my own voice. So this worked well for me.
Thanks for watching. If you'd like to support the show, please click on the link below. You can also contact me at my website if you have any questions about filmmaking or anything else. Off to the side, you'll see a couple of my books, Film Notes and the Film Notes Workbook. I encourage you to check those out if you'd like to learn more about filmmaking. See you in the next episode.
Scene one, Apple, take one.